After last week's deck building card review, this week's review is the polar opposite, a card game where deck building is off the menu. Hi folks, and welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to be reviewing KeyForge Call of the Archons, a unique two-player card game by Richard Garfield, the mastermind behind games such as Netrunner, King of Tokyo, but most notably Magic the Gathering. This game was previewed at Gen Con in 2018 and went on a full retail release in November of the same year. Now the story behind KeyForge is somewhat loose, but there is one, so let me explain what it is. You play the role of an Archon, an almost godlike creature who inhabits the world of the Crucible. This is a world built by the architects by cobbling together pieces of every planet in the galaxy, bringing with them a variety of creatures, cultures and technology. As the Archon, you seek to understand the secrets of the Crucible, which is held in various vaults across the land. In order to open these vaults, you must forge keys made of ember, a precious substance which runs through the Crucible. To achieve this goal, you assemble yourself a team made up of 3 of the possible 7 houses of the Crucible. However, there will be other Archons out there that are trying to discover those secrets for themselves and stop you unlocking those vaults. Now, I did tell you the theme of the game is quite loose, but it does go somewhere into explaining why there are many different races and different sort of aesthetics to the houses in this game and why you're trying to forge those keys in the first place. Now, as I mentioned, there are 7 different houses in KeyForge. The houses are Brobnar, Mars, Sanctum, Logos, Dis, Shadows and Untamed. Now, I won't go into what the different houses do, what their playstyle is or what their theme is behind them. However, just to say that basically each house does have a different playstyle, and it goes from things like some are very much attack based and some are much more kind of tricksy and are all about player denial. There are 4 different types of cards in KeyForge. There's action cards, which are abilities that can be triggered immediately and then discarded. There's artifacts, which are weapons and abilities that sit behind your battle line and remain in play. There's creatures, which are your main battle line cards and remain in play from turn to turn, and these deal out damage or reap ember. And lastly, upgrades, which, you guessed it, upgrade your creatures. You play the game with a hand of 6 cards, and you nominate one of the houses in your hand to play this turn. You can play as many cards from your hand this turn as you'd like, however they have to all be from the nominated house. The aim of the game is to acquire 6 ember tokens which allow you to forge a key, and it's the first player to forge 3 keys is the winner. So now you know roughly what the game's about. Here's where it becomes interesting and where the unique aspect comes in. Now, this is not a card game in the spirit of Magic the Gathering or Star Wars Destiny, for example. There is no deck building in this game. You buy a sealed, blind box, and in that box is a sealed deck. Now, this deck is all you have to play the game. There's no deck building, there's no adding cards to it, and there's no taking cards away from it either. What you have is what you have. Now, the unique aspect through some very clever computerized algorithms is that there are no 2 decks the same. Now, that's not technically true. It does say on the FFG website that there are 104 quadrillion combinations within this game. So the game has to be around for quite a long time and sell very well before we'll see any duplicated decks. However, I'd assume by that point, there's probably been a few more cards released. So the likelihood is very unlikely. So each deck truly is one of a kind. Not only does it have a unique deck in there, the artwork on the back of your deck is unique to this particular deck. No other deck will have that same artwork. Your deck will also have its very own name, which again is unique to that deck. This is a randomly computer generated name that is unique to the deck, and it has thrown up a few interesting names. However, FFG are on top of that issue now. Now, this is a very interesting prospect on many different levels. Firstly, it's quite an inexpensive entry point. The retail cost of a deck in the US is just under $10 and just under £9 in the UK, and that's before any discounts. So it really is an affordable way just to try out the game. Removing the deck building aspect from the game means you won't have to chase those cards that are the most powerful ones in the game and you know will improve your deck, albeit at the cost. Now, to be fair, there have been some KeyForge decks selling for some ridiculous prices, but I'll touch on that later. It's a relatively easy game to pick up. I taught both of my sons to play, and they were comboing the cards quite quickly with their experience from games like Hearthstone. I even taught my friend Jason to play it on New Year's Eve after quite a few drinks. However, there's a real tactical side of this game once you understand what the weaknesses and strengths of each of the different houses are and how they combo together. The game then becomes more about how well you know the game and how well you know the houses, and less about how good your deck is. Now, because these decks are computer generated, there will be some that face some bad matchups or are just naturally more powerful than others. This is one of the reasons why we've seen some ridiculous prices on eBay for decks. However, in that does lie some of the charm of the game and one of the reasons to play it again and again. You could just say that you have a particularly weak deck and go out and buy another one. The inexpensive price makes that quite an easy option. Or you could try playing that deck again and again and see if you're missing something. Is there a combination in there that you just haven't found yet? There's a real sense of, did I just play the deck wrong? Or did the cards just not fall for me this game? Rather than the feeling I get from CCGs, which is, I just didn't invest enough time and money into the game to build a good enough deck. Now, from a competitive player aspect, FFG are aware of this potential imbalance in some decks, and they've introduced something called chains. Chains are a way to try and balance some of the decks that are racking up multiple wins. If you win a few games with that particular deck and it appears to be a little bit overpowered, then you'll get some kind of handicap system, which means that you will be drawing less cards per hand. So instead of starting with 6 cards, you may only start with 5. Now, if you keep winning with that hand of 5 cards in that deck, you will gain more chains. Eventually, if you keep winning to the point where you only start with 2 cards in your hand. Now, should you keep winning with that deck, if it is so overpowered, there is a way that FFG can retire that deck from organised play. The way they do this is each unique deck has a QR code which they can scan, and it will either give chains to it, so next time you come to a tournament, the tournament organiser will know exactly how many chains that deck has, or it will tell the organiser that this deck is so overpowered it's being retired from play. Now, this is a very clever idea, and there's obviously a lot of thoughts gone into it. There's also been some really interesting tournament formats that I've heard about. How about a sealed deck event? You just rock up on the day, you pay your money, you're handed one of these sealed decks, and that's the deck you need to play with today. There's no kind of getting used to what's in that deck or learning how all the combos work. Everybody is on a level playing field. How about an event where you bring your own deck, and it is the best of 3 games. You play the first game with your own deck, the second game you play with your opponent's deck, and should it be ones each after that second game, you then bid on chains to decide on which deck you use in the third game. There's some really interesting things about this game that seem to set it apart from its competition. Now, all of that said, none of it would matter if the game was awful. However, luckily it's not, and I really enjoy it. I love the way there's no deck building involved. As a casual player, not having the deck building, which is the part I enjoy least about collectible card games, is a real bonus for me. There's no preparation to the game of building your deck beforehand, and there's also no arms race to chase when the latest releases come out. I also like that from a casual standpoint, it's a really inexpensive game to dip your toe into. Now, as you can see, I've got multiple decks here, but that's just for our games at home. We just pick a random deck, and that's the deck you need to play. I'm also quite impressed that FFG have thought about some of the complaints that might crop up when this game was released, and they've looked to address it with the chain system and potentially with the retiring of decks. It'll be interesting to see if any actually get retired. Now, don't get me wrong, the game isn't perfect. The theme, as I mentioned, is very loose, and it does feel a little bit tacked on after the game was created. Now, this may not bother some people, but could be a deal breaker for others. If you play a game like Magic or Netrunner that you're really invested into the theme, this might not be the game for you. The artwork, whilst very well done, might not be to everybody's taste. It feels very much designed for a League of Legends or Overwatch crowd rather than for a Magic player base. The aesthetic of all the different houses doesn't really sit well together, and actually the explanation for it in the background feels like more of an excuse rather than a reason. Now, also, the rules are online. They are free, which is great, and you can download them, and I know why they've done this, so that whenever there's an adjustment to the rules or an update, the latest version is always online. I've had to print this copy off myself. However, in the starter box, there's a really kind of loose getting started rulebook that just says, look online and get the latest rules. It would have been nice to see in that starter box a proper rule set. Now, speaking of the starter box, you don't need this to play. I think it is good value and it may be something you consider picking up. You get 2 starter decks in there that are replicated across all of the starter boxes. These are slightly more basic, and I think it's quite telling that the one house that isn't in those 2 decks is the Mars deck, which is a little bit more tricksy. You get all of the tokens you need to play. You get stun cards and power cards, which are basically just modifications that you need to track through the game. And you get 2 of these sealed decks also. However, you don't need this. You can just pick up one of these deck boxes and just use any tokens you've got. Just make sure your opponent knows exactly what it is you're tracking. Now, with those negatives aside, it doesn't stop me enjoying the game. I personally don't feel the need to be really invested in the theme of a card game, and I really like League of Legends, so the aesthetic kind of suits me too. I should just say that I don't play Magic the Gathering, as I don't feel the need to invest that much time and money into one particular card game, so I should just say that in fairness for a balanced review. If you like the idea of Magic the Gathering or other collectible card games, but don't want to spend the kind of time and money that you need to invest into building decks, maybe this is the game that you should give a try to. If you want to try playing competitively and you like the idea of just rocking up, buying a deck and taking part in a tournament, this is definitely a game you should give a try to. If you want to try a card game that you can basically just play casually, stick a deck in your pocket or in your bag and just maybe play between games, then this is definitely something worth giving a shot. So let me know what you think. Are you a Magic player that's tried KeyForge and really enjoyed it? Are you somebody that's give it a try but really don't like the fact that it's got no deck building in? I'd love to know what you think down in the comments. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.